Welcome to One Insight. My name is Litvin. I grew up in London and I now live in LA. And this is a podcast for extraordinary top performers and their coaches. You see, I've coached some of the most successful and talented people on the planet. I can see what most people cannot see, and I dare to say what most people wouldn't dare to say. And what I know about success is that on the other side of it, it can be incredibly lonely. You can feel more of an imposter the more successful you become. And when you're the most interesting person in the room, you're actually in the wrong room. Clients who are more successful, more intelligent, and wealthier than you need your support more than they know and more than you can imagine. I coach around insight. Life looks one way, something happens, and the world looks different, and your entire world changes. It can happen in an instant. And this podcast is called One Insight because a single insight can change everything. Neurodiversity. In today's episode, I'm going to do something slightly different. I'm going to bring along one of my clients, a member of 4PC, Elaine Taylor-Klaus, and we're having a conversation around neurodiversity. Neurodiversity is an ability to think in very different ways. Sometimes actually gets in your way. I want to talk about where that's also a gift. We want to talk about where neurodiversity can really be of value. Your awareness of it can be valuable as a coach, and also where it can help and inform you as a leader. I really enjoyed this conversation because it's a chat between me and someone I respect very, very much, Elaine Taylor-Klaus, this expert on different ways of thinking. Enjoy. Hi, Elaine.
Hey, Rich.
Hey. Tell me before we begin, what's your background? How did you get from where you've been in the past to where you are now?
Wow. So where I am now is I run a global resource for parents of what I like to call complex kids. Mm-hmm. And I'm a trusted advisor, I provide training, coaching, support for parents, executives, professionals, supporting or raising or dealing with adults or young people with neurodiversity. And I got here because I am the mom of 3 complex kids, now young adults. And over that process, discovered that I myself was a complex adult. My husband's a complex adult. And so I spent a lot of years trying to learn how to navigate neurodiversity without a lot of support at first. And it really took a number of years to understand it. And then when I was introduced to coaching, I discovered that coaching was a spectacular vehicle for really learning to manage it.
Beautiful synopsis, really sharp and sweet. You're a thought leader in this world, both of working with parents, understanding the needs of what you call complex kids, and then at complex adults. The modality you use is often coaching. You've built a business where you're known by thousands and thousands of people, 2 great books out in the world. And the reason I wanted to bring you on today is something unusual. Normally I'm coaching, I'm modeling coaching, but you've been talking to me for a while now about this word neurodiversity, and you have a passion for bringing this awareness into coaching, and I'd like to learn more.
Awesome.
Cool. So help educate me. Define the word neurodiversity, first of all. Let's get a definition out.
It's not easily defined. Neurodiversity, I think maybe a short version definition might be, I often say the brain doesn't discriminate. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't matter where you are in terms of race, religion, socioeconomic. If your brain is wired to think differently from the neurotypical brain, then that is what's defined as neurodiversity. It's a brain that thinks, processes information differently from, quote, the norm.
And so how do we define that? I often say the phrase that when I was young, I knew I was different. I just didn't know it was okay to be different. Does that mean I was neurodiverse? When I look back, I used to go to nightclubs with my friends because that's the only way we could socialize back then, because we were trying to meet girls. And I hated it. And it was years later before I realized, I get overwhelmed by loud noises and loud sounds. I'm more of an introvert than an extrovert. I go to an event with lots of people and I need a week off to recover afterwards. Does that mean that I'm neurodiverse, or are these different things?
So it could. And I want to make a distinction between, so some people with neurodiversity have a diagnosis. Some do not. When we look at so if you look at the CDC in the last year, CDC identified.
Say what the CDC is, people who don't know.
The Center for Disease Control in the United States.
Yep.
And they collect a lot of data and really cutting edge current data generally. And what CDC says is more than 41% of adults have demonstrated or are expected to demonstrate some symptoms of anxiety or depression, particularly during the pandemic in 2021. Sure. And there are statistics all over the place. But if you look at people who struggle with learning disabilities, people with ADHD or anxiety or depression, what you described a little bit ago with sensory issues, people who struggle with that. People with chronic disorganization may be dealing with some kind of a neurodiversity. In this day and age, we've seen a lot of stuff in the coaching realm about trauma and neurodiverse and trauma-informed coaching. And we now understand that trauma actually changes the wiring of the brain. And so trauma is one aspect of neurodiversity. So when people process information differently, they are neurodivergent. And it may be caused by wiring or genetics. It may be caused by the experience in life. It could be caused by a trauma, whether it's a physical trauma or an emotional trauma. It is almost half the population, if you really think about it. And so we're all going to encounter someone who either is neurodiverse, or we're supporting or living with people who are neurodiverse, or we're employing people who are neurodiverse. It's like we can't really not encounter it.
So one of the things I've noticed and even read about is that in the world of entrepreneurship, there's a high correlation with things like ADHD, dyslexia, just thinking differently, which was a problem when you were in high school because teachers didn't understand how you thought. And the only way you could succeed is looking for what I would call shortcuts. Well, that's a great skill set to being a great entrepreneur. There's a high proportion of entrepreneurs that I've met who have conditions like ADHD. And is that something that you see? Is that
huge?
Right? Okay.
There's data around it. It's like 300% more likely for this. ER docs, 70% of ER docs have ADHD, for example. High performing.
That doesn't sound good.
Well, no, think about it. They can move back and forth between different things really quickly, right? They're processing information in a different way. But there is a higher propensity in certain industries. What happens with people with neurodiversity, I think, is that we have a tendency to play to when we accommodate for ourselves, we play to our strengths. And that's why you see so much success in so many areas. And if we're good at playing to our strengths and outsourcing our weaknesses, we can be unbelievably successful. Think Richard Branson, right? Who really attributes his success to his neurodiversity. So sometimes it can really be a leading edge. I often say about people with when I'm talking about complex kids, our kids are specialists in a generalist's world. And so when we try to get them through school, it can be really, really difficult because school expects kids to be generalists. But when we allow people with neurodiversity to specialize and really lean into that gift, when we tutor the strength, not the disability, that's when, all boats rise, cream rises to the top, whatever you want to call it. That's when we really can glean the greatest capacity from people.
So how, as coaches, do we make use of this? How do we use this to help our clients? What do we do with this?
Well, I think as coaches, part of the reason coaching is such a great modality for people with neurodiversity is because it's our natural tendency. It's an empowerment-based modality. It's a strength-based modality. So we see what's working and we cultivate it. Where I think we run into challenge as an industry or as a profession is when we don't recognize the ways in which neurodiversity are causing obstacles. And when we get caught up by them. So just like you've got people with neurodiversity who can be extraordinarily successful, you also have the prisons filled with them. So people who haven't learned to accommodate for themselves, or people who didn't have an environment that set them up for success and allowed them to be successful. Yeah. So, and I know it's a weird metaphor or analogy, but so with coaching, it can really help people play to their strengths. But if we don't recognize what people are struggling with, we can interpret it as they're not motivated. We can mistake their lack of action as a lack of intention or commitment. We can begin to consult with them because the coaching isn't leading where we want it to go, or where we think it should go. So we as coaches, if we don't understand the neurodiversity that's present, can actually impede our ability to serve our clients as effectively as possible.
So is there a tool to identify the way that our clients think?
I think there are a number of them. I did some work in the last year around neurodiversity inclusion in coaching. So I put together a guide for the ICF on this, and that we've created for our community to begin to help coaches identify when is neurodiversity present and what do you do about it? Because I'm not saying that a general coach can't coach neurodiversity, because we all do all the time. What I'm saying is that we need to recognize when the neurodiversity is at a point where it needs to be supported differently. And so that may mean referring out to a coach who specializes in it, or it may mean referring to another provider. So sometimes people will show up with neurodiversity because they self-identify. People who come to us and they say, yeah, well, I'm really ADD, or yeah, I struggle with anxiety, or I have depression, right? Sometimes they know.
I'll ask a question about that, because there are people who talk about depression, meaning they've had 3 days in a row, they didn't want to go out and eat a lot of ice cream or watch a lot of Netflix. There are people who are clinically depressed. Correct. There are people who have a diagnosis of ADHD. There are people who fidget a lot and want to watch 10 different things at the same time. And there's this spectrum, I guess, of where we're self-identifying. And no, you don't really. That's not a diagnosis.
Right. It's a trait versus a diagnosis.
Okay.
So when you have these traits, these tendencies, these proclivities, something only becomes a diagnosis if it becomes an impediment, if it interferes with your capacity to achieve what it is you want to achieve. And all of these things, the diagnosis is dependent on, honestly, whether it's causing a problem in your life or not. So, if you have massive ADHD and you've learned to accommodate and navigate and work with it, it may not reach a point where it ever requires a diagnosis.
And well, that's the piece that always interests me. I'm always looking for where our gifts get in our way, or where our struggles can become our gifts.
Exactly. Well, I believe that every gift we have over applied becomes a liability, becomes a challenge, right? Just like every tool can also be a weapon.
Yeah.
And so when we understand how we're wired and what our propensities are, we can learn to navigate with them. And that's really what I think the key is when we're coaching neurodiversity, is to understand when it's a gift and when does it cross over to become a challenge.
Well, one of my favorite exercises to do with clients is to ask them, how do you think? And it throws them for a minute. What do I think? No. Well, what do you think? How do you think?
Right.
And I think it's a really fascinating exercise to have people slow down and look at, how do you think? How do you approach life? How do you approach a challenge? Are you solution oriented? What occurs when danger arises? Do you jump into the fray? Do you run away? And those are all really powerful ways to get people to reflect on their own thinking. Most people don't put much attention on their own thinking.
Exactly. And what you're describing is a processing, is how do you process and use information and then act on it or not. And most people, and that's a big part of coaching neurodiversity, is being in the process of problem solving instead of only focusing on solution, which is, again, why coaching is such a good modality for it. But understanding not just how do you process, but where the source of the obstacle is. So let's say you've got a client who's committed to do something, and then they come in the next time and they haven't done it. Understanding why they didn't do it or what happened that interfered with their doing it. Did they not do it because they totally forgot about it? Is it a working memory issue? Did they not do it because there was an ambiguity and they weren't clear what the steps were and what the first step was? Did they not do it because there was an emotional piece or a fear or like understanding that place? I often talk about getting underneath the challenge. We see what the challenge is on the surface, but then we have to get under it, a couple layers, and see what's really behind it. Because otherwise, we're often problem solving to the wrong problem.
So where do we go with this? What do we do with this now? We've got background out of the way. We give some awareness to people about this. Where do they go next?
So there's kind of two places I've been playing in this arena. One is I believe that general coaches obviously need to be better informed about neurodiversity. Understand where it's showing up, how it's showing up, what the obstacles are, what training they need to be able to coach it more effectively, what techniques work, and when to refer out to somebody who can really support it more effectively. And so that's one place that I've been looking at is what is my role in this world of neurodiversity as a thought leader in neurodiversity, in terms of how do I keep bringing my profession along? Mm-hmm. Because I really take a stand for the professionalism of our industry. And I do.
Where can people read what you're writing about, this ideas of neurodiversity?
Well, my website is impactparents.com, and I have I'll do an impactparents.com/rich, and so that people can download this handout on A Coach's Guide to Neurodiversity, so that nice. That sort of foundational information is available. So impactparents.com/rich will get them there. So that's a lot of what I'm trying to figure out is what's needed from me in this larger community. And is it, I don't want to become a coach training organization, right? Mm-hmm. But is it training coaches in neurodiversity inclusion? Is it bringing neurodiversity awareness into the marketplace, into corporate environment? There's all this emphasis on DEI, DEIJ, DEIB, whatever you want to call it. And neurodiversity is a form of inclusion that is beginning to get some awareness. So is it there? Is it working with execs that have neurodiversity themselves, or helping them understand how to work with the people on their team with neurodiversity? I'm trying to figure out what this space needs. I'm one of those people that see a need, fill a need. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to understand what the need is at this time and space.
And well, where's the need strongest? Is it in the corporate world? Is it for leadership? Is it in the coaching world? Where do you see the need is strongest?
I think it's everywhere. That's what I'm struggling with. Mm. I mean, I really do. I think that.
Well, so if it's everywhere, let me ask a different question. I'll ask a different question. If it's everywhere, which of those appeals to you most?
I think I'm standing at a place where, personally as a coach, right? So I've established a really amazing company to support parents who are challenged with issues of neurodiversity often themselves and are raising kids in this realm. And I have a phenomenal team of people supporting them. And our value has always been about making it affordable and accessible. So I know that those services are there, that they're well-trained, well-mentored, and available. And so in this moment, personally, I'm kind of looking at, I've heard you say many times, who we coach is who we see in the mirror. And who I see in the mirror now is an established executive and a CEO running a global company and integrating my understanding of neurodiversity in everything that I do in running my company. And I think that's what's exciting me, is this notion that there's this new playground for me to play that is new for me in terms of supporting my peers in a different way. I see that smile.
Yeah, I smiled and I paused because I wanted to see if that landed as you said it out loud. How did that land for you saying that out loud?
Still a little fuzzy, but I'm curious about it. I'm not sure what it means.
I love the phrase, always make your curiosity bigger than your fear. So keep heading in that direction of curiosity. And you'll find out, you might discover after working with a couple of leaders who have global companies that actually they don't excite you so much. And it turns out that it was the world of coaching, or actually I tried that out and it wasn't that either. And there's something else that you don't even know right now. But follow that direction, that desire of curiosity.
Yeah, it's a great awareness. I spent the last couple of years really looking at what does it mean? What could it be to take? We have a training program called Sanity School. So, taking that into employee assistance programs. And I really think that there's a space for that. And what I realized is I don't know that I want to be the one to do that. So I'm looking at bringing somebody onto the team who can really take it into that space, because I think there's a need. But I am paying attention to, at this stage, what do I want to spend my time doing? And I do love educating people about this connection between neurodiversity and coaching, about how coaching is so masterful at supporting everybody, especially people with neurodiversity.
Well, back all the years ago when I was a teacher, two things really struck me. In my teacher training, I was taught, don't teach the way that you think, teach the way that they think. And most teachers don't get that. They don't have an awareness outside of themselves. So like, why are you not learning? This is how I learned. You should be learning too.
Right.
And then I was introduced to Howard Gardner's thinking styles. And then there's different ways of thinking. Most people don't understand this, but one of the reasons so many of us struggle in high school is because most teachers are great at verbal linguistic and numerical thinking. They've got these ways of learning and thinking to do with words and numbers. If you're not good with words and numbers, you're going to struggle in school. But there's natural thinking, your ability to be out in nature, to be one with animals. There's spiritual thinking, kinesthetic. The kids who are always tapping their foot in class because they want to move and all they're thinking about is the basketball game they're going to play next. Teachers can't stand them on the whole because they don't get them, because they weren't that kid in high school unless they're the PE teacher. So those kids struggle in school. And it dawns on me that all these years later, we're having the same conversation, whatever forum we're in. How do you think? And how's that helping you? And how's that getting in your way?
So, two things came up as you said that. One is that thankfully the schools are shifting and understanding that differently, and project-based learning and all kinds of things. Our kids are being educated in a very different way than we were and than we were taught as teachers. But the other thing that really just that's starting to come in a little bit is that a lot of this is about inviting people to see their full capacity, to see to inspiring people to embrace difference and to see the value of people who think differently on our teams and our families and our whatever, that so many people are programmed to resist difference and it's got to be channeled. And I think what I love to do and what really impacts people, what I hear from people in my community is it's almost like giving them permission to be themselves, to be wired the way they are wired, and to be wildly, fabulously successful in being that.
It's a high-level leadership skill to invite the people around you to be provocative, to say things that are different, to not fit into the norm. This is the way that this business works, so don't rock the boat. In business, you have to do both. As a great leader, you have to be willing to say, no, this is the path we're following, but also to really be great, listening constantly to your team, asking them for divergent opinions. Not many leaders get that.
Well, and to not take it personally when people diverge.
Yeah.
Right. There's so many skills in coaching that we learn. And that's the other piece that I think shows up is the coaching competencies that we as coaches take for granted are super powerful leadership skills, especially when it's applied in this context of people who think differently.
Beautiful.
So I think
it's a great way to end. That we've gone on this journey from this word neurodiversity through this world of coaching into leadership. And I think that's really key for those of us who are coaches and leaders, understanding that word can be really valuable for you if you see how you think differently, if you invite different kinds of thinking from the people you work with, and then also as a coach, being aware of how the people around you are thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a new world we're stepping into. And more what we need is going to be more and more people critically thinking and thinking differently and thinking outside the box. That's the future that's the generation that our kids are getting to see differently than we were. And this may be the time for us to keep up with them instead of the other way around.
Nice. Great catch. Yeah, beautiful. Elaine, thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
For most of human history, it wasn't called coaching. It was called leadership. And it's what I love to do, to coach people, to lead people, and to mess with people's thinking. If you'd like more of this, or if you'd like to learn more about our community of extraordinary top performers, go to richlitvin.com/oneinsight.